Hey everyone, it's Lexie. So in today's video I'll be sharing with you my Halloween reading recommendations. So I always think Halloween is just that time of year is just always fun to read kind of spooky books, whether it is fantastical spooky or just real life spooky, because real life can be scary enough. So I have a good collection of books here. Some are, like I said, are fantasy, some are historical fiction mixed with murder mystery and just a good old psychological thriller. So yeah, without further ado, let's get started. So first up, this is a book that I did read when I first read it around kind of Halloween time, and I think that is the perfect time to do this. And it is also one that is a blend of historical fiction with mixed in with a murder mystery, and it is The Bone Garden by Tess Gerritsen. This book has a dual storyline. So the present day storyline is this girl moves in to this old house that was built in the 1800s, and when she is kind of doing the gardening work, she discovers a skeleton that's been buried in the garden for over 100 years, and so she's very curious of the identity of the person who was found in her garden and kind of the history of the house. So as she's kind of going down a rabbit hole of the history of, you know, the people that lived in her home, we get flashbacks to Boston in the 1800s, and we follow a girl named Rose whose sister just died during childbirth, and she is left caring for her newly born niece. And then she also cross paths with I forget his name, Norris Marshall, who is a medical student, and he is not able to afford to be in medical school. So he has a bargain with the university where he basically steals fresh cadavers from the graveyard, and so that's how he basically pays his tuition. And so their Rose and Norris's paths eventually cross when there are a string of murders taking place that obviously somehow end up being connected to them. And this book is super spooky. So like the Boston, it's in the 1830s, and the way Tess Gerritsen is able to describe Boston in this time period where there's fog, there is this, you know, killer going around with like a cape, and that's all you see. Like, it's just totally spooky and atmospheric, and kind of has that like spooky hollow vibe to it in, you know, 1800s Boston, which I think was a lot of fun. It was like really spooky to read some of these parts where it's like you as the reader are aware that maybe something's off, and you're just experiencing it with the characters, with your heart racing, like you are totally immersed in this read, which I think makes it a lot of fun to read, especially around Halloween time if you kind of like the kind of older kind of Halloween vibes. I just think it's really spooky, and the way Tess Gerritsen is to like seamlessly weave in the past and present storyline makes for a really enjoyable read as well. So like I said, this one I feel like is not, I don't hear a lot about. I don't think I've heard anyone on BookTube talk about this, but I think it is a really fun, unique Halloween read that is perfect to read around this time of year. So next up, this is a YA fantasy series that when I read, I think originally in grade 10, I was obsessed with it, and I haven't read it since, so I've definitely been thinking about wanting to reread this trilogy in the future. And it also kind of has that Victorian old school vibe to it as well, and it is the Gemma Doyle trilogy by Libba Bray, the first book being A Great and Terrible Beauty. This follows Gemma, who after her mom is murdered before her eyes, she is sent to this all-girls boarding school where she finds out that she has kind of this like supernatural power where she can connect to this other world around her, and it kind of goes off from there. I think it's best to kind of, you know, dive into this book and not really know too much about that besides kind of that general setting, general synopsis. But the setting of here, Victorian London, with kind of super paranormal things going on, makes for a really fun read. And especially Gemma, she's kind of very much new to this world, so you get introduced to this kind of different type of setting with the main character as well. You're just as, you know, you're kind of just dipping your toes into this world with this main character as it goes along. But as the series progresses, it just escalates more and more, and it's been long enough that I don't remember a lot of the details, but I was just really obsessed with this. So I don't know how this, because I probably read this when I was like 15, 16, so I don't know how this holds up as if I were to read this now as a 27-year-old, but I remember at the time really liking this. So yeah, I feel like it kind of has that like gothic Victorian, you know, paranormal feel to it. So if you're looking for something different with a little bit, like if you like trilogies too, then I highly recommend you go check this one out. Next up, we have a psychological thriller, and I feel like these are always fun to read around fall season, especially with Halloween. Even though it's kind of like Halloween is about like ghosts and monsters, I feel like the real world has enough monsters as it is for kind of real world scenarios or settings to be pretty scary as well. And for this one, I have Pretty Girls by Karen Slaughter. This follows two sisters who've had a falling out when they were in their teenage years, when their older sister disappeared and was never found again. So this kind of very much kind of split the family apart, and the sisters have had very little contact with each other over the past, you know, few decades. So when one of the sisters' husband is murdered before her eyes, it kind of has some eerie similar kind of instances and coincidences start to kind of pop up that are eerily similar to their sister's disappearance. So they, you know, begrudgingly join forces to figure out what is going on. And yeah, this one, it was just super like interesting and a thriller. It's very graphic though. I'll just give that kind of trigger warning. It is very graphic in some instances, so just be aware of that. But it was just such an interesting, fun read, and like it was just again heart-pounding. Like there's parts in here where it's just like you can feel that like tension and that pressure within like the storyline kind of increase, and then once it finally like erupts, basically all heck breaks loose, and it is just a crazy ride. I definitely want to read more Karen Slaughter books in the future. This is the only one of hers that I've read, but I feel like this one is just a lot of fun, and how she's able to tie in this like, you know, 20+ year cold case into this present day kind of, you know, crime, I think is very interesting. And she does it in a way that also is, it doesn't feel like this story's disjointed where you're kind of getting the two different narratives kind of on different timelines. I think she does it in a way that makes the writing flow and the overall storyline progress. So yeah, this one is just, you know, super intense, and the ending of this one just blew my mind. So if you're looking for a psychological thriller to, you know, dive in during the spooky season, this one I think would be really good. So this is one that I haven't read yet, but I do plan on reading it this Halloween. So maybe when this video is up, I will have already read it. But it is The Nature of Witches by Rachel Griffin. And to my understanding, this is about witches who have elemental power, who are kind of the ones, you know, watching out for the weather, but it also integrates climate change into the equation of this as well. So I'll quickly read the synopsis here. So it says, for centuries, witches have maintained the climate, but now their control is faltering as the atmosphere becomes more erratic, the storms more destructive. All hope lies with Clara, a once-in-a-generation ever-witch whose magic is tied to every season. In autumn, Clara wants nothing to do with her powers. It's wild and volatile, and the price of her magic, losing the one she loves, is too high, despite the need to control the increasingly dangerous weather. In winter, the world is on the precipice of disaster. Fires burn, storms rage, and Clara accepts that she's the only one who can make a difference. In spring, she falls for Sang, the witch training her. As her magic grows, so do her feelings for him, until she's terrified Sang will be the next one she loses. In summer, Clara must choose between her power and her happiness, her duty and the people she loves, before she loses Sang and her magic and the world is thrust into chaos. I think this is really interesting, kind of taking the kind of witch elemental magic and then into, sorry, there's a car going by, that integrates it into kind of the modern day climate change, you know, disasters that we're kind of seeing now in terms of weather instances, like being more severe and more frequent. I think that's very interesting, kind of taking the current day climate crisis and integrating it into kind of a magical witchy story. So I'm very curious. Like I said, this is only one of these that I haven't read yet, but it had witches in it, so I had to include it in this video. And lastly, I realized as I was filming this that I included 2 Libba Bray series in here, so, you know, watch out. This used to be like a very much talked about book on BookTube, or series on BookTube, but I haven't heard anything about it in a while. But this one is one that I always think of when it comes to kind of like spooky Halloween-esque reads, and it is the Diviner's Trilogy, again by Libba Bray. And this one takes place in the 1920s, and it follows a group of friends who are known as the Diviners. So they're people that have some sort of supernatural, paranormal kind of skills. So one person can touch objects and kind of know the history of the person who owned that object or came in contact with it. One person can walk through dreams. One person can like heal people. So it kind of goes like that. And there is this kind of evil man known as the Crow King who is wreaking havoc, and it kind of goes off from there. And I really love this series. I don't feel a lot of people talk about this anymore because the hype was there when this series originally came out, and I think it's just really well constructed. If you like the 1920s era, I think you will definitely like this, but it doesn't kind of glorify or romanticize the 1920s. In addition to kind of the fantastical narrative, the author is able to integrate a lot of social injustice and kind of racial issues that were very much present and during this era, in terms of racism, the rise of like the KKK, testing, like the eugenics movement, all those things, and is able to tie it into a way that is kind of shows these themes and these social issues are very cyclic, and they're still very much present today. And I remember in the 3rd book she talks about how a lot of the social issues that she talks about were very much inspired by the 2016 election, so I thought that was really interesting. But this one is super spooky. I remember reading this, I think I must have been going into my last year of my undergrad or going into the summer before my master's, and it was super creepy. Just the way these chapters are told, the narration style from the King of Crows, kind of small little chapters that are integrated in here were so spooky. I remember reading this at night and being like, I need every single light on because this just creeps me out. I'm like, my bedroom's on the main floor, like I don't feel safe right now, because that's how scared this book made me feel. And I think it was just, I haven't had a book that was like that scary reading it, and I thought it was just really well crafted. It, again, in addition to being kind of like a fantasy series, she integrates a lot of social commentary as well. So yeah, like I said, I think it's the 3rd book is my favorite. Before the Devil Breaks You was really, really good. But yeah, I love this series, and it's definitely one, again, in the future. I think it's still fresh in my mind with the last book coming out that I kind of know this series pretty well, but definitely for the Gemma Doyle series, I do want to reread that eventually. But yeah, if you're looking for kind of a fun, paranormal, you know, 1920s era, you know, fun read, then I recommend checking this series out. So that's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments below what some of your go-to Halloween reads are and all of that fun stuff. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you guys next time. Bye, guys.